I'm not a racist, preach to teach the art.
You still they never had this.
Number one, never wanna run about the gun. I wasn't licensed to have one. The minute they see me, fear me. I'm the epitome, a public enemy. Use, abuse, without screws. I refuse to blow fuse. They even had it on the news.
Don't believe the hype. Don't believe the hype. Don't believe the hype.
Back when I wrote y'all, yes.
The message is rhyme. It feels like verse. It feels like it is written by somebody, a child of hip hop, not just the child of Jim Crow, but child of hip hop. It is steeped in those kinds of lyrical styling is what I want to say. Somebody tried to say that Ta-Nehisi Coates is not a journalist, but more of a composer. And it was an insult. They were trying to insult him. By the way, this is the Karen Hunter Show. In case you're just tuning in for the first time, thought it might be a music show because we do. Music is very prevalent in the show. Welcome. We've been here on these airwaves 10 years. If you're new, hi. We've been here. Don't call it a comeback. We've been here for 10 years. But the journalist and Barry Wise, I was about to light her up, but I ended up deleting it because I'm like, I'm not trying to engage or getting into a Twitter war with somebody that is not worthy of having a dialogue with. But this woman who calls herself a journalist retweeted the quote, and I thought it was hers. But from this person writing about Ta-Nehisi Coates, he said he's not a journalist. He's more of a composer. And composers, just like in a movie score, they set the mood. And two things can be true. Yes. And it's unfortunate. I feel like there's some jealousy going on because you're unable to set the mood. Good writers, good journalists. Yes, you present the facts, but you're also setting the table for perspective. And one of the things that this book, The Message, does is call out resoundingly the hypocrisy of the country and the world that we live in, and it is chef's kiss delicious. I'm only into chapter 2, and I'm like, oh my goodness. So I got up, I told you I went to the gym. It was too crowded at 6 o'clock, too damn crowded. And I just want to say something to y'all people in the gym at 6 o'clock. God bless you. You're special. And I know you're all successful. You're doing well in your lives because nobody gets up that early and goes that hard before the sun even comes up. Nobody does that. And you're paying for gym membership. I was telling somebody who said, my gym is too expensive. And I said, well, healthcare is more expensive. Being sick is way more expensive. Get your ass in the gym. Let's do this. Let's get healthy. But I was walking. I went to the park because I'm like too much breath in the gym. It's early. I went to this park, the reservoir, and I got my walk on. It's about a couple of miles, and it was still a little dark out, and I had my Ta-Nehisi Coates in my ear, and I could have probably walked to Roselle. Let me see how far I could have probably walked to Union comfortably listening to that book. It was just so good. So I want to play a little bit of it for those of you who prefer, and personally, as I was listening, I prefer to read this book. I prefer to read this book. Ta-Nehisi's cadence and flow is very Baltimore. It's very Baltimore. And my Jersey ears took a minute to have to adjust to, and I'm sure some of y'all have to adjust to my Jersey. I'm sure you do. As some of you have to adjust to Larry's Brooklyn, but I was like, I'd rather read this because the way in which his words are just, I want to see them on the page and I want to digest them and I want to feel them. So I ordered the book. I ordered the hard copy because I want to actually sit and read this. He starts with a quote from Sonia Sanchez, and there's a Baldwin quote that follows it. And I was like, damn, okay, we're just going to be centering. And the reason why I'm bringing this Thrive Thursday and every day is kind of motivational Monday on the show, because the mission of this show, if you don't know, is I want everyone who listens to this program to be healthier, wealthier, and wiser. I need you to be better than you were before you listened. And part of that assignment is challenging you. And it's uncomfortable for some of you. I've heard so many people say when they first started listening, they couldn't stand me. They couldn't stay with it, but then they had to come back. was a call, hey, come on back. And then they got it. And I wrestle not much with how, because my personal style is very blunt. It's not very demure, and it's not, sometimes it's mindful, sometimes it's not, but I don't mince words, and I'm not somebody that thinks a whole lot about presentation and whether it's going to hurt people's feelings, because I feel like it's truth, and truth is designed to be painful. Truth is going to be painful. Most of us don't want to hear the truth. It's painful. We usually get mad. They say you don't kill the messenger, but you usually do. In history, the messenger gets killed. They're delivering the truth, and they end up catching a brick. So I've always kind of understood that this was going to be an acquired taste on the Karen Hunter Show, that it would not be for everybody, but the people that heard it and got it, they would get it good. And they would go out and gather and deliver and take the messaging back and then build and grow from it. Their lives would be better. And whether they wanted to keep it a secret or tell the world, that was up to them. But I understood coming in here that this was not going to be a popular show per se, because truth is not popular and it's not fun. It's not fun. It's not fun. But I'm going to deliver it, and I'm not going to do it nicely sometimes, because it is not, truth shouldn't be nuanced. You should swallow it and let it get through your system, and what's wasteful, let it go out the other end, but let the truth nourish you, has always kind of been my approach. So listening to Ta-Nehisi, I want to listen, I want to read it, I want to sit with it, I want to digest. I was like, as I was walking, I had to turn it off and let that message sit with me like for half a mile and just ponder. Made me want to come back and write, and I don't even like writing like that. I got back, I was like, clackety, 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 clack. I'm sitting there, right? I said, this man uninspired me to get back to doing something I don't really care for. But I had to say some things on paper, on the page, on the computer page. So I appreciate him just for that, just for the inspiration. But I'm going to play some clips from the message this hour next. I want to start, Smiz, with the chapter 2. So chapter 2, he's talking about his first trip to Africa. And, well, let him tell you. Play it, Smiz.
The weight of my first trip to Africa, the many years it took me to actually go, is directly tied to that canon and to the work of its luminaries. Men like Josiah Nott, a 19th century anthropologist, epidemiologist, and student of civilization. Nott was also a slaveholder, which meant that he profited from the trade and labor of the people he enslaved, and then profited again by his chosen field of study. Nott wrote to his mentor, the anthropologist Samuel Morton, in 1847, "My niggerology, so far from harming me at home, has made me a greater man than I ever expected to be. I am the big gun of the profession here." That profession had but one aim: assembling all the knowledge Nott could summon to prove we were inferior and thus fit for enslavement. It may seem strange that people who have already attained a position of power through violence invest so much time in justifying their plunder with words. But even plunderers are human beings whose violent ambitions must contend with the guilt that gnaws at them when they meet the eyes of their victims. And so a story must be told, one that raises a wall between themselves and those they seek to throttle and rob.
So he had me go down a rabbit hole. Of course, I had to find out who this Josiah Nott, N-O-T-T, who he was, anthropologist, ethnologist. And as I was thinking about this Josiah Nott, who owned human beings and then went on to become, in Ta-Nehisi's words, a niggerologist, an expert in the N-words, right? He became a studier of the N-words because he had them. I can't even imagine what he did to those human beings on his plantation. He was a surgeon too. He was a surgeon, so I'm sure he might have used them in experiments, because he came to these conclusions about skull sizes and intelligence. He had a chart that showed a Roman and the skull size, a young, a Negro and the skull size, in the shape of the face and a chimpanzee, and made the correlation between the chimpanzee and the Negro. We're going to get into it today because these stories have been indelible, and we've been fighting these stories for most of our lives. It's time to put these stories to bed, to rest. There's a lot of talk and commentary around Ta-Nehisi Coates' new book, The Message, that came out October 1st. As I was talking to you before the break, I started listening to it today on my walk, and didn't run into any talk about Palestine yet. I'm in chapter 2. But there is a lot of talk about messaging and stories and narratives and the power of it, right? So in chapter 2, it's entitled The Pharaohs. On Pharaohs is the actual title. On Pharaohs, part 2, chapter 2. And we played a clip about his first trip to Africa. I think it was Senegal. And he was bringing up this man, Josiah Nott, who was the foremost leader in what he called negrology, the study of Black people. And he had enslaved people on his plantation. And, what Ta-Nehisi was saying, it wasn't enough to have people in bondage, but now you have to do the work to justify that. And that work was done through quote unquote science, I'm putting up air quotes, science. This man was a surgeon. So this person was respected as a man of medicine. He was an armchair anthropologist because he got to study people. And again, I'm sure he also performed surgery on folk on his plantation because he owned them. So you have to justify, because nobody, and he goes into this he said, even in the hood, when somebody says, let me hold that jacket when they're going to rip you off, or that bike looks like my cousin's bike. You are telling yourself a story to justify doing something dastardly, taking something from somebody. So you got to tell the story. I think that's my cousin's jacket. I think, that's that chain. Let me hold that chain. And it's interesting, because we live in this country where all we've been inundated with since childhood are these stories for 400 years. 400 years, the stories, the lies have been told over and over and over and over again. The fact that any truth has bled through, the fact that we're bursting through with truth at all is a miracle, which also tells you the truth can never die for long. But it's also our responsibility to erect it. So I appreciate him because I didn't know about Mr. Josiah Nott. I knew of people like him. We also always talk about the quote unquote father of gynecology and all of this. During my era, there was a guy that did something called the bell curve, where he was a college professor. Now I never forget this, because I'm sitting there like, this man is teaching children, teaching our babies this nonsense about somehow people being genetically inherently inferior. And the bell curve of society. I was like, yo, his name was Charles something. But I was thinking about how far back this goes. I remember seeing these charts with the skulls and this man did that, put it out widely. And as a publisher, I know it takes money to publish. It takes money back then. The average person couldn't purchase a study or purchase a novel even. Books cost a lot of money, just to, purchase and read. Most people weren't literate. So then you get to be the authority and you get to set the table. But even more dastardly than just absolving yourself from the moral corruption of doing horrible things to human beings under the guise that they're not quite human. When you run into their humanity on the continent of Africa, when you actually run in, it gets really weird. Play clip 2.
For such a grand system, a grand theory had to be crafted and an array of warrants produced, all of them rooted in a simple assertion of fact: the African was barely human at all. Josiah Nott looked out at the world and saw great land masses, and to each he assigned a race, and to each race he penned an exclusive ancestor whose descendants were fit to rule or be ruled. The grand problem, he wrote, is that which involves the common origin of races. For upon it hangs not only certain religious dogmas, but the more practical question of the equality and perfectibility of races. The problem of common origin was the problem of common humanity. And common humanity invalidated the warrant for African enslavement. For if we were all descended from the same parent, why then was one branch made solely for enslavement? This want of a specific warrant to plunder specific humans is as old as race itself. In fact, it's the whole reason race was invented. Africans had to either be excised from humanity or cast into the lower reaches to justify their exploitation. But evidence for this banishment has been generally wanting, while proof of the contrary is everywhere around us.
Yes, it's everywhere. It's right there. It's in plain sight. I realized this a long time ago, how infected I was with anti-blackness because it's baked in, right? And so I've said this before, the pendulum has to swing all the way back over. So I'm like doubling down on black. I'm like black as you can be, because I'm fighting and I'm battling the anti-blackness that has permeated every corpuscle of society, every inch of society. It's baked into everything. So we have to be vigilant. Some of us, go to way extremes in our vigilance. I think we should still be fair, because you don't want to do to people what was done to you, right? That's wrong. It's wrong to paint people with the same brush that you were painted with, isn't it? I think that's wrong. I think it's wrong to dehumanize the very people that dehumanize you, even if it feels good and feels right, because that makes you know better. It's wrong to oppress the very people that have oppressed you, even though it may feel good and you want that revenge and it feels good in the moment. It's wrong. It's wrong. And then when does it end? When does it end? I'm having a different conversation right now, but you know it. You can pick it up. You can pick up what I'm throwing down. But when he said that, the common humanity had to be invalidated, of course it did. And race had to be invented. Of course it did. And they went to great lengths to do that, right? We're living through it right now. Some of you still defend yourselves. And I love, I said it took my Jersey ears a minute to really digest the cadence of Ta-Nehisi's voice. And there's some that would listen to him and make the almost fatal mistake in assuming that somehow this man is not ready. And you would find out very quickly, as our CBS so-called journalist found out this week. Yeah, that's going to end poorly for you. And I love that, because I've played with this my whole life, this notion of how I'm perceived, whether I'm going to lean into it. It's a game, that code switching and also toying with other people's bigotry. It can be fun if you are somebody that, like I am, who likes to bat a ball around with like a cat. I kind of like to play with people sometimes, actually a lot. I have to stop myself on these airwaves because it gets good to me. But it is fun. It's fun because their bigotry can be used against them in so many different ways. And you can play. Oh my goodness, the gamesmanship, if you really, enjoy playing games as I do, can be really fun. But more important than anything is that we walk into I've been saying this before, not just our power, because it's there, it's God-given, but our sense of self and purpose and knowledge to know, which is why I'm so grateful that we do In Class with Carr. I'm so grateful for Nubian Narrative. I'm so grateful that we are in a time such as this, that we can have these conversations, because so many more of us are free, not just free, not just emancipated, but free to be able to have these conversations, because they're important. They're important. They shape the future. We are responsible. When he says journalism will save the world, that's chapter 1. Where he says this, journalism will save the world. I'm like, yes, yes, because it's the storytelling. Journalism is not a luxury, is chapter 1. And journalists will save the world because the stories that are told today are the ones that are going to impact tomorrow. Josiah Nott was able to demonize a whole continent for 400 years. across the globe, this man's chart on our skull sizes and the proximity to chimpanzees and all of this stuff that we're not quite human, we're savages, all of that stuff because he was an ethnologist or a niggerologist, as Ta-Nehisi Coates writes, stuck with us, and we were still fighting, putting on suits and ties, and make sure you don't see us as anything but human, making sure we speak proper. We beat our children into perfect diction because we're human. Ain't I a woman? Like all of this stuff. And as I said, you don't owe anybody anything. Your DNA started the world. Top that. Take that. There's no you without me. Period. That's enough. Gave you the work, gave you everything. That's enough. I can stand on those shoulders very proudly. So I appreciate him just putting it into prose here. 866-801-8255. But then he went to I'm gonna do one more clip because I'm not, there's so much here. This is I'm just chapter two on pharaohs. Play the third one.
In 1799, the French invaded Egypt and beheld the splendor of a civilization older than Greece or Rome. Egyptology was born and became a sensation, rolling across Europe like a wave, crashing into America in the antebellum years, just as slavery was reaching its apex. Nott was enthralled with ancient Egypt. His collaborator, George Glidden, separately referred to it as the origin of every art and science known in antiquity. But Egypt was in Africa, that continent niggerologists deemed a font of slaves, and this immediately raised uncomfortable questions. Morton wrote to his protege Nott, "It has been the fashion to quote the Sphinx as an evidence of the Negro tendencies of ancient Egyptians. They take his wig for woolly hair, and as the nose is off, of course it is flat. But even if the face, which I fully admit, has a strong African cast, it is an almost solitary example against 10,000 that are not African." Nott and Glidden dedicated their lives to clearing up any confusion about the racial composition of Egyptians. They authored the treatise Types of Mankind, which sought, among other things, to cleanse ancient Egypt of any taint of blackness. For many centuries prior to the present, the two wrote incredulously, the Egyptians were reputed to be Negroes, and Egyptian civilization was believed to have descended the Nile from Ethiopia. When the record failed to support a total absence of Negroes from Egypt, Nott and Glidden put them where they needed them.
Oof. To have that kind of power, just imagine. That's why even in our Bible, people have used those scriptures to demonize, but Nat Turner saw something different. This is why interpretation is important. This is why community and examination is important. Nat Turner saw those same words and saw liberation in the very thing that he was sent out to further put people into bondage. But we have the power to change those stories. It says life and death is in the power of the tongue. We must speak the truth out into the universe and give life. They wanted to cleanse Egypt of all blackness because when they saw the Sphinx, they saw hair of wool, nose like yours and mine, Negro nostrils, as Beyonce would say. They knew the face was that of an African. And that was problematic because your whole scientific hypothesis falls apart if this very continent that you say is the origin of all things also includes those people that you're holding in bondage. That place comes from those people that you have in bondage and you have deemed inferior. So now you have to throw away your research? No, you don't. You throw away history and facts and truth, and you make history what you want it to be, which means we're going to bury these Africans no matter what. But we cannot be buried. What they thought they were burying were seeds. Welcome. It's the Karen Hunter Show, 866-801-8255. I don't know if this is the most important work because I don't do that to, because, we have a short attention span too. So it would be like, and then tomorrow will be something else, be another Kendrick song or something will come out to distract us. But I do think it's important. And I was thinking as I was walking I don't even want to do this to him either. Is he our generation's Baldwin? But then Baldwin, we can have everybody, Baldwin and Audre Lorde and Nikki Giovanni and Sonia Sanchez and all of the people saying the things, Toni Morrison saying the things that need to be said. All of them, Gwendolyn Brooks, they're worthy, and we should study them all, and we shouldn't put them in comparative categories, and one shouldn't be greater than the other. But this man said some things, and he's saying things with his full chest, and it's very hard to dispute. But the question for America at this point is, are they willing to put to bed their lies? Are you willing to put to bed your lies? The lies you tell yourself every day, the lies that your family all accept the holiday time. Are we willing to do that for the truth, the bitter truth, the painful truth, the truth that might make us very uncomfortable, but will also set us free? Are we willing to do that? Are we willing to do that? I think we must. Or we'll be right back here. It'll be a cycle, and we'll never see any change, no real change. And we have all of these opportunities throughout time where there could have been real change, and then something happened, and then we go back, we revert back, because it's more comfortable sometimes to be in an uncomfortable bondage than it is to be in a painful freedom.
My days are cooler, nights are warmer, and I put the blame on you. Time moves slow, but my heart beats faster. When these eyes are looking right at you, you give me something to believe in.